Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, the 6-game road trip is over, and it ended with a thud. 129-121. The Lakers lose in Atlanta. They are now a season-low 3 games under 500. LeBron is hurt. Things are not going well. We'll talk about that and more on the next episode of Locked On Lakers.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Want to thank everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. Sometimes on weekends, we get this thing up as fast as we can for you, bright and early, everywhere you get your podcasts. And we appreciate all the support there. Remember, Locked On Lakers on YouTube also gives you access to the podcast on a lot of off days, early in the day. So earlier in the evening, I should say. So we appreciate that. Make a Locked On podcast your second listen of the day. Perhaps Locked On Rams with Travis Rogers, the Super Bowl bound, Andy, Los Angeles Rams.
Yeah, it was an exciting game, man. There was it's actually these playoffs have just been great in general. It's been a really, really fun NFL postseason.
Yeah, and at least things are going well for one LA team. Look, let's get into it because it wasn't that long ago. It was right after the Brooklyn game. We had some high hopes for where this road trip could go. They looked like they had some winnable games. LeBron and the Big Three were all playing together. They won a nice game. Oh my God, the wheels came off this thing quickly. They lose the last 3 games of the trip, including Sunday's 129-121 loss to Atlanta in Atlanta. And oh, by the way, LeBron missed all 3 of those games. So a great deal to talk about with this one. But can I start here? From a morale standpoint, for me, they're a season low 3 games under 500. It seems like they've been here at some point, but they haven't been. This is as bad as it's been from a record standpoint. I also feel like this to me feels like it's as bad as it's been from a possibilities standpoint. Just, they are 5 games now behind Dallas, I believe, for the 6th spot in the Western Conference. They are correct. Yeah, so it's Dallas, and then they're and Denver. They're tied. So I was stumbling, and that's why. They're 3 games under. They've got the questions of whether or not LeBron is going to play. They are much more locked into the 9 and 10 spot than they are the 7 and 8, just to even have the better end of the play-in. And they are running out of games. And I am as pessimistic today as I have been all season long, just about where they are and the math and all of this other stuff. Is that reasonable, or am I giving up too early here?
No, I mean, it's reasonable in the sense of that's where they are right now. I mean, you look at where they are, 51 games in this season. There's 31 left, and it's interesting. These next 5 games that they have before the All-Star break, or 4 of the next 5, you've got Portland twice, the Clippers, the Knicks, and I believe it's Milwaukee. Those are the next 5 games they have. Not in that order, but those are the 5. 4 of the 5, the 2 against Portland, Clippers, and Knicks, those are no BS must-win games, Brian. Like, they are straight up, you have to win those games, just in terms of practically speaking with the standings, but also the specifics of the standings, because the Clippers are one of the teams that they are currently 1.5 games behind right now. The Clippers are currently the 7. So if you want to try to make up any ground on those guys, you have to win that game head to head.
And there's a big difference. People understand there's a big difference between the 7 and the 9. You if you're in the 7, you win 1 game and you are into the big boy playoffs. If you're in the 9 or the 10, you got to win twice. And right. So there's a significant difference in those. And
spots. Then Portland is the team that is currently a game and a half behind them. So you have 2 opportunities to make sure that they don't end up, and they're a team that has been struggling this entire season, that they don't end up ahead of you in terms of the play-in possibilities. And then just the Knicks have been in a free fall. There's a lot of questions about what they're going to be doing at the deadline, buyers versus sellers. But either way, their season has been a massive disappointment. Those 4 games are, again, and it's crazy to be thinking about this. We're not even formally into February yet. Those are must-win games. There's no way around it. And that, Brian, when you asked about, am I being too pessimistic? I would say no. I think you're being a realist just because I had to make that point. And again, it is not formally February yet.
No, and it's talking about the play-in. We're really talking about seeding for
Play-in.
Play-in. And Utah is in free fall. I mean, maybe they fall far enough that the Lakers could get hot. Like, it was funny, Anthony Davis, and we'll get into some of the specifics of Sunday's loss, because there are elements to hold on to regarding hope that I don't want to skip, whether we get fully into them in today's show, whether we explore it more for Tuesday or whatever it might be, as the Lakers have a couple days off. It is, we're talking about the play-in, and they are functionally in a position where all the other stuff, can they get up to the 4? Can they get to the 5? Can they get to the 6? Can they get all of these things? These little benchmarks are out the window, and unless you believe, like Anthony Davis, who was asked again after Sunday's game, do you still, capable of winning, that 10 games in a row? Like, he talked about that earlier in the season, that he felt very confident that once they got it together, this is a team that could rip off 10 wins in a row and be on their way. Setting aside for a moment the idea that a 10-game winning streak would make up the gap that they need to get to the 6th seed, because I don't think it would.
By the way, Brian, that's a third of the season that they have left.
Yes.
Like, to put it in pretty dramatic terms, you would be talking about ripping off a third of your upcoming season in consecutive wins.
Right.
Kind of crazy.
Yes. For a team that has won, 24 times all year, 10 in a row would be like a healthy portion of their output for the season. Setting aside for whether or not you think that could get them, high enough or really put them in position to really jump up in the standings, they have shown no ability, even when everybody's healthy, to win 7 games in a row, 8 games in a row, 10 games in a row. Like, none. It has not been demonstrated that they could do that yet.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit on the idea of even when they've been healthy, because the sample size of when they've been healthy has been so small. I'm not going to read anything into that. And
I did see, just to your point, I saw an updated, I think it's 308 minutes the big three have played together.
Yeah. So, I mean, to be, I think both fair to everybody and also just accurate to everybody, they have not played enough as a big three with everybody healthy to really evaluate what they could do when they're healthy, which I think is, we've talked about this before, Brian, an overriding frustration for everybody on this team, because they have not gotten an opportunity to even prove that they're terrible, like legitimately terrible to get. Like, I'm being serious.
But I understand what you mean. It's funny.
In certain respects, I think it would be easier for these guys to accept what's happened this season if they had been healthy and they just weren't good, where they could say, you know what, man, we took a massive swing and it was a bad idea and it's not going to work. And we can already start thinking about how can we undo this and make next year work better, because we know it won't work.
That, by the way, is its own series of podcasts,
of course it is.
Because the long-term outlook here isn't good either.
Anyway, we're going to have plenty of time to get into that. But the truth is...
Too much.
Yeah, maybe. But the truth is they have not gotten to see it. And that's led to the frustration. I think over these last 4 or 5 games, there have been stretches in all of them where they have legitimately looked much better. Mm-hmm. Like, even periods where they didn't have LeBron, even periods where they didn't have LeBron and AD, they've looked better. But as AD talked about with a lot of frustration after the game, Brian, they are not closing well at all. He said, we were supposed to win this game against Atlanta. They can't close. They have a lot of self-inflicted mistakes, which makes Anthony Davis and I on the same page, because it's something I've bitched about all effing season.
That's true.
But also, it was very telling with AD, because as much as he expressed multiple times belief in this team, and he said over and over, we are a good team. If we have everybody, we know we're a good team. He also said that they could use the All-Star break to recharge and get away from the game for a while. And that is not the sentiment that you hear from a team that is rolling. Team that is rolling wants to stay playing.
No, that's true. But they're not rolling. Not at all. But yeah, I mean, it's just, the other part of it just made this so disappointing to me in terms of they got off to a good start. Atlanta pushed back. The Lakers made another push. They ended the third after it looked like Atlanta was going to take over that game. Really strong, went into the lead. And they let it get away again. But let's talk about the game specifically and some of the potentially optimistic things, because Anthony Davis played extremely well on Sunday, a second straight game coming back from the injury where he was pretty dominant. And so if you are looking for hope, it was there with Anthony Davis. We'll talk about that. And then obviously the implications of LeBron's knee injury. We'll do all that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Built Bar. It's the new year, and that means New Year's resolutions. And if yours is about getting fit, eating healthier, make Built Bar part of that plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar because it's covered in 100% chocolate. It allows you to eat healthy, but keep it from being boring. So after like 3 weeks, you're like, screw this, man. This sucks. Where's my chocolate? Your chocolate's in the Built Bar. Most Built Bars, they contain just 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, but 17 grams of protein. That's the good stuff. And there are awesome flavors to choose from. You got peanut butter brownie, cookies and cream, salted caramel, coconut almond, and down the line. Built Bar's always coming out with these cool, unique, interesting flavor combinations. So you want to stay on top of it. Try them all, man. That's the way to do it. Go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your first order. Again, promo code LOCK15, 15% off at built.com.
Okay, so there were some statistical highlights for the Lakers. I mean, people are going to complain about Frank Vogel and what he did. I mean, I thought his biggest mistake on Sunday is they had a great strategy in the first half, Andy, of make every shot that you take. And they got away from that in the third quarter. And I thought that was a terrible mistake. They shot almost 70%, I believe, in the first half. And that they weren't winning by more did give me a bit of an unsettling feeling. But, Atlanta finished this game at 58%. Look, they're not a good defensive team. And they're even worse without LeBron. And even when LeBron plays, it's very difficult for this group to be good all the time defensive, like a good defensive team. Even bad teams are good defensively sometimes. But this is not a team that can sustain it very well.
No, and they especially struggle, like you said, without LeBron. Because if you're playing Anthony Davis at the 5 and he really constitutes not just your back line, and, there are ways that you can pull him from the basket. And Atlanta, I thought both exploited this, and also at times I rewatched parts of the fourth quarter. I thought there were times where schematically it looked like they were not even having Anthony Davis drawn away from the basket, but actually having him set up further in terms of who he would be guarding, as opposed to being switched on someone higher, having Stanley Johnson back. And that's when Kongwu was just destroying them, over the top with these lobs. And I personally was a little surprised that they didn't eventually just switch back to, or switch towards, having Anthony Davis primarily back there. But either way, I mean, regardless of it, when he's your only back line, and he's really the only guy with size that you have currently available that matters, it magnifies that absence of LeBron, because he just gives you one more option, not even so much as a backline guy, but if he is the last man back there, like LeBron is a really good weak side shot blocker. He's better at rotations with size, the size that he presents, than some of the other guys. And if, say, you've got LeBron, Stanley, and AD, you start just giving yourself more options with the size that you might encounter going small, in terms of either switchability, guys who would be available. And not having LeBron there really, on a few different levels, screws them up defensively. However good you think they can be, they are going to be demonstratively worse without him.
Yeah. And look, they got some really good, Malik Monk was insane on Sunday, 33 points. He was 8 of 14 from 3-point range, 12 of 19 overall. But he was part of that fourth quarter execution, though, when they needed good possessions and good buckets where he did, and he talked about it at the end of the game. He made mistakes trying to get the ball that he should have gotten the ball to AD once or twice and didn't. Like, just the execution in crunch time, when you need stops, when the opposing offense is moving a little quicker, when the opposing defense is putting a little more pressure onto you, which is what they all said Atlanta did over the course of the second half, which is why they stopped shooting 70%. It's just they're not equipped for it, and unless the big
miss
three
LeBron
is
a
out
lot there too.
Yeah, I mean, unless the big three is playing, and it has just become clear that they are so absurdly dependent on those three guys being present and awesome for them to have night in, night out chances to win, because THT hit all of his shots in the first half, whatever, Reeves did Reeves stuff, and Monk was insane, but like they're very, very limited. And to that point, Anthony Davis was excellent again, 10 of 20 from the floor, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, a block, 27 points. And it is a second straight encouraging game from him. And if you are looking for things to be optimistic about, it's like the idea that the Lakers can just win if AD is good enough and LeBron is good enough, because if LeBron can be what he was, 2 weeks ago, you have 2 of the top 5 guys maybe in the NBA on your team, and that can win you series. Even if the rest of the stuff is a little discombobulated. That's essentially what it is now, right? That's the hope.
Yeah, I mean, it slots everybody too, because I mean, Westbrook, who, for what it's worth, I thought played well. I don't think he was incredible in this game, but he was, again, not an issue. At 20 points, 8 of 15 from the field, 12 assists, only 4 turnovers, which is quite good when you consider how much he's going to be handling the ball in this game, orchestrating. The last game, Russ could have had a lot more assists, but nobody could make shots at all. But Russ, though, as your second option, he's just not in a place anymore where you can count on that on a game in, game out. Nor, frankly, do you even want to be in that place where Russ is performing that role. And, however it's really supposed to look between the three of them, again, stop me if you've heard this before, we have not gotten the opportunity for that to really take shape. But there are not a lot of guys on this roster right now that you feel confident with, on a game in, game out basis over the course of, all 48 minutes, however many they play on both sides of the ball, particularly when the games start getting tight. Like, it just, there's no closing unit, in part because there's been no continuity, but there's also been no closing unit because there's no real obvious choices in terms of who would naturally slot where. And that speaks just to a lot of where this team is, period.
This is one of these things. And I think we are certainly at a point where optimization of lineups matters. And if we've been there a little while. And there are certain things, Avery Bradley was silent again, 4 points, 2 of 5 from the floor, missed his only 3, he played 22 minutes. So he missed his only 2 3-pointers. He did, he fouled out and just it wasn't impactful. And it's difficult to play him and Stanley Johnson at the same time. I like Stanley, but he's not an offensive force. He's not somebody. So you kind of have 2 holes in your offense. But the flip side is, I mean, I guess I understand the emphasis on defense, to what extent, Frank thinks that helps him.
Look, but like, if you don't count back cuts, Bradley's pretty great.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
but like, I mean, your other option, when guys aren't, is Austin Reeves, who played 26 minutes. And, Reeves is better. I think I would play Reeves more than I would play Bradley. They don't,
and he has been lately.
And he has been, but he doesn't, they also don't serve exactly the same function. And when people talk about some of these like lineup optimization questions, they sometimes, I'm not talking about it, but like there are a lot of fans, I think, who kind of approach this with this idea that the answer is obvious. It's like, that Frank Vogel is choosing to go into, the Indy 500 with, a 1987 Toyota Corolla when an Indy car is sitting in the garage waiting, that is not an option. Like your other option is like a 1989 Toyota Corolla. And there is, because like you say, the combination of both sides of the ball. That it would be something that I think would help the Lakers, the John Travolta thrust. That's the problem. It's like you plug one hole with an offensive player and it creates another hole with a defensive player. And that is where they are. But at the very least, Anthony Davis looks like a guy who could play at the level the Lakers need him to play at over the last part of the season if they're going to have a prayer, both in the play-in side and then against a Phoenix or Golden State in the first round, which is essentially where we are. And I hope he can keep that up.
He said after the game that he feels really good. I mean, he feels, not even just physically, like in terms of the stuff that he's been dealing with, Brian, but just the idea of he's starting to feel like he's in a rhythm. And I think also AD has really recognized this moment of importance and just like how much is riding right now on the way he plays. And he's been very good. There have been times where he's been involved, I think, in the defensive lapses, just like everybody else. But by and large, since coming back, he's been really, really good. But also just with AD, we talked about this all the time, man. You want to feel like that urgency from him to be like, F it, man. This is going to be my game. Like you are going to feel like afterwards, the court has been tagged. AD was here, like similar to the Shawshank Redemption with Red, after he left prison or the halfway house, like all of that. You want to feel like AD leaves his stamp, and it's been starting to feel more and more like that. Just got to get LeBron back and keep everybody on the court. And then I guess we can just figure out one way or the other, how good can they make themselves over 31 games?
All right. So like you say, it's predicated on LeBron. It's predicated on AD elevating. LeBron has not played in 3 games. Right knee swelling. Didn't even go to the game in Atlanta. Headed back to LA ahead of the team. It ain't good. Let's talk about LeBron next. All right. So LeBron James, talked about it, and Frank Vogel talked about it, and everybody talked about how they're paying very close attention to his minutes and the workload while Anthony Davis was out, and all of this stuff. And LeBron said he was okay, and it wasn't a problem, and he wasn't tired, and it was, he was in this amazing offensive groove, which is true. But I don't buy the stuff about not being tired, and I clearly don't buy the stuff about it not having an impact, because that was too much. And I think you can draw a pretty straight line between the work he was doing and the amount that he had to do to the fact that his knee just ballooned up and he can't play right now. I mean, those feel related to me, Andy.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully, Frank Vogel said that so far, in terms of what they've discovered through MRIs or anything like that, is nothing other than just general swelling. So hopefully, but my totally
General Swelling, by the way, was the worst character in the new Star Wars movies. The evil General Swelling. It's been a very depressing episode, Andy. You have to try a joke somewhere. This has not been an uplifting episode of Locked On Lakers.
No, it absolutely
is not. We're not here to do that. That's not our job. But I'm just, throwing a dad joke there. That's fine. Boo this. That's fine. Yes.
Anyway, though, hopefully, because I was thinking about, I remember there have been times over the past where, you can't see everything on an MRI because there's so much swelling, and you have to wait for the swelling to go down, and then something gets discovered. That was the first thing that popped in my mind, was oh crap, does that mean there's more that they're not telling us? I don't want to make
cryptocurrency. What are they going to find in there?
I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not suggesting that this is the Doge coin of injuries.
Golden ticket to the Wonka factory.
No, but
what's inside that thing?
I know that there have been.
No, I'm kidding. But that's, right. But honestly, even if it's nothing, even if it's just old man swelling,
he's an old man. That's the problem.
General Swelling's father, old man swelling.
Decent
like
callback.
it's very unnerving, and we can get into the long-term issues about this sort of injury maybe throughout the week because they matter. But short term, it's like every one of these days that goes by where LeBron can't play with these dudes, they dig themselves even deeper into their hole. But also, too, it's like they lose the capability of being able to figure their way out of it. Um, he's being smart. They're being smart. But again, it's the mood. I don't know if after all we've seen this year, the idea that, oh, well, LeBron can kind of round his way back into shape, he'll feel fine, works by the playoffs or works by, because it's not like they can let him sit for the next 3 weeks and really heal up. I mean, I guess unless they absolutely have to, and still expect things to be okay when he gets back.
A thing that I talk about a lot, Brian. I mean, I remember I used to say this a lot with Kobe, like pre-Achilles. Although actually I did used to apply this to him as well in terms of that recovery from the Achilles injury, because you got to remember when that in particular happened, that period of time, an Achilles tear was considered a death sentence for a lot of athletes, much less a guy like Kobe who had that type of mileage pre-Achilles. But there's always a point where every great athlete, even guys like Kobe or LeBron, who were exceptionally in tune with their body and also exceptionally good at taking care of it, there's always a point where it stops cooperating. Every athlete just reaches that point. And LeBron, his body is still cooperating in terms of when he's out there, he can do great things, but it's not cooperating in the sense of recovery. And I think it's not recovering in the same way when it just comes to dealing with general stress.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Who was worked underneath general swelling.
Okay, now that was actually funny. Comedy comes in threes, Brian.
Right.
It was a long way getting there, but congratulations.
Well,
that was actually good.
Yeah.
That was actually good.
But here's the thing. It's not even so much that he gets hurt way more. Like Kevin Durant has missed a ton of time this year, and Harden's missed time, and Giannis has missed time. Like, guys, it's not even that he's like, you would call him injury prone in the sense. What he feels like is just normal. And so much of what the Lakers are built around is the idea that LeBron isn't normal, both in his performance, which has been abnormally good relative to everybody else, but also in his durability, in his health, in his ability to play every game. Because LeBron came into the year I'm going to play. And I don't think he relishes missing these games.
No, he's not doing load management. But I will say this though, if this was interesting to me when you said that they are built around that idea of him being the indestructible cyborg. And maybe they were built around that when they first brought LeBron, or they had that when they first brought him in, they had that mentality and that vision for themselves as a team. I got to be honest, that vision should have been dispelled after his first season. Well, no, they've been
trying. Let me rephrase. They've been trying to correct it. It just hasn't worked. They keep going through these iterations where you're trying to make it so you are not reliant on LeBron being, this superhuman character. They just keep failing at it. So, and in spectacular fashion, I think this year more than any. And I am skeptical if they were 7 games over 500, you could look at this and say, okay, you know what? Let's punt the 3 seed. Let's punt the 4 seed. Let's fall down to the 6. It doesn't matter. Give LeBron.
We know how good we can be.
Right. Let's give LeBron 2.5 weeks. Let him charge that battery back up and fully heal. And we'll go from there. And we can win just as easily as the 6 as we can as the 3. Nice to have home court. We don't need it. They can't do that. They're not in a, it is not likely that they fall out of the 10, beyond the 10, but they're not so far ahead that, you could say like, oh, we can lose 7 or 8 in a row, which they could do. And like, there's no danger. I mean, we're not there yet, but like, you understand what I'm saying? Like they just don't have the luxury of letting LeBron get
No, there's a
and if
bleep ton of danger if they lose 7 or 8 in a row.
Right. I mean, again,
that is red flashing light danger.
They're 4 games ahead of, I'm sorry, 2.5 games ahead of Portland, but 5 games ahead of San Antonio, who's the 11. And you are technically not SOL completely until you fall to the 11th seed. There is hope as long as you are 1 through 10. Practically speaking. So I hope the news is good as the week goes on around LeBron. They are making obviously no promises as to whether or not he plays Wednesday. And these are winnable games even if LeBron doesn't play, because the teams that they're playing are not world beaters themselves.
I cannot stress this enough, Brian. 4 of the next 5 are straight up no BS must win. Like, you have to win these games.
You want to make sure you're not messing around. Let the Clippers get too far ahead. Let Portland catch you. All that stuff. You got to win these games. All right, so we'll talk a little bit more about LeBron's knee. I think this week is a good time to talk about the sort of the future implications of that as well, like what this injury kind of symbolizes, at least to me, over the course of the long term. What the Lakers are going to be looking at going from here, and then some bright spots. The continued display of Austin Reeves. The Rams are in the Super Bowl. I am done with my whole 30, which means I can eat like a normal human being again. Very excited about that. Can't think of anything else. It's about it. Locked On Lakers on YouTube. Buy some Built Bars. See everyone Tuesday.